Yeah, and I think that's where, so the resilience is actually like the payout, right? I think that a lot of times when, like in the instance of our business, I'm thinking, man, if things would just work right, then we would make more money and then I'd be happier. Like, I'm not going to lie and say that I don't think that at times. But the resilience from the suffering is what is really the payout, because like then you can withstand other storms in your life. And so, James talks about this. It's James 2. It says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." It says nothing about attaining wealth, status, success, power. Literally, like, steadfastness produces a full effect, which is perfect and lacking in nothing. Yeah, I'm excited, super excited about this one. Like, being able to come into this conversation around, like, what we just heard on Suresh's podcast about what was going on with his life and how, like, unfair it was to be that guy, and, like, how we can talk about it here.
Yeah, man. No, I'm with you. I think I mean, some of the stuff that we deal with in business, like, it's easy to slip into a victim's mentality. And, I think we've already referred back to that interview twice now in conversations. It's amazing the stuff that he went through, yep. Including, racism, where I think it's extremely easy and understandable for many people to fall into like a victim's mindset, where, like, not only are they dealing with that, but they're also dealing with, some of the negative things that can come out of being put in a place where you're dealing with that. The same could be said for, I think I mentioned, part of my story, during that podcast. Like, so when I was younger, like, I was insanely ADHD, like, on a level where, like, teachers resented me. They didn't like having me in the class, and I get that, and they also weren't trained to really deal with that in the early 80s, in Texas, or for that matter, maybe anywhere. And it ended up, manifesting itself in a way to where, like, like I had a vice principal that, like, wouldn't let me be on the safety patrol at one point because of I was at the school and I left, because my parents pulled me out of because of something that happened at the school, where they were really went over the top on the way that they disciplined me. And it wasn't just spankings. Like, I got spankings all the time, and that was no big deal. You got punched in the face as a I got thrown into a wall. No, that isn't what happened, but that's a top podcast for another time. But my parents pulled me out of that school, put me in another one. When I came back in 5th grade, like, my grades had gotten exceptionally better. I was like all A's and B's. Like, I was really doing well. And I went back to that school, and they interacted with me like the kid that was in 1st grade twice. So I was in 1st grade once, and then, like, I was so challenging and I didn't learn anything. And so I went a second time.
You repeated a grade too?
Oh yeah, buddy.
I did too, man. Yeah. I always, like,
part of the club.
Yeah. I repeated 2nd grade because, I think I started 2nd grade in Japan when my dad was in the Navy, and okay. I had started a year early, so I was in kindergarten, 4th grade, 1st grade, 5th grade, like, whatever it was. So I was a year ahead, but super small. So when we moved back, they're like, "You should repeat a grade." And I was like, "Great, I get to do an extra year of school. I'm so excied."
Like, thanks, guys.
Thanks. That's what I wanted to do with my life.
Thanks for looking out, Dad. Yeah. But when I came back in 5th grade, so they were interacting with me like that kid, the one that was, and I wasn't a bad kid. I just was, man, I was a lot to deal with. I think I was so bored, and my mind was moving so fast that, like, it was impossible for a teacher to entertain me. Only thing that could slow me down was adrenaline. And I mean, dude, I used to try in 1st grade. I would try and escape from school. Like, I legit tried to, like, break out. Damn, like, right. I'd hide in the bathrooms. Like, and it was because of the way they treated me. I got yelled at all the time. Anyway, when I came back in 5th grade, the vice principal told me that she didn't want to let me do safety patrol because she didn't trust me. And I don't know, like, what adult tells a 5th grade kid that, like, I don't trust you. Like, But that's, that's what they did. And there wasn't like any like, hey, here, I'm having a hard time trusting you and thinking you're ready for this. And here's why. And here's, if you do this, then this and this, like, okay, then, like, I know you're serious about this. Like, I'll believe you. So what did I do? Like at that time of my life, I was like, well, screw this, man. Like I was not like Suresh where I'm like, all right, I got to be better than everybody. I got to be perfect. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to hang out with my old friends I used to hang out with here. I'm going to go behind the school and smoke cigarettes. I'm going to be that kid. That's the way they're treating me. And so I just slipped back into that and, got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So that was my reaction. So I went into a victim's kind of mindset.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today on the podcast. We just had a podcast, episode 28, with Suresh Madhaven, who was he was a black kid in an all-white neighborhood, and for 2 times, and just subjected to the most unfair kind of treatment that you can imagine. Like the kind of stuff when, like you hear about Jesus being flogged and he's perfect and your heart breaks. If you read those stories and you're not moved by that, you're like, this is just so unfair. Categorically, as a person, I can't imagine going through that. That was kind of Suresh's story, and both Nate and I were really stunned by his response. His response was never to be like, man, this sucks, this is unfair, and to give in to this victim status. And instead it was just to double down, be better than the person that they didn't like. Like, so if they didn't like Suresh when he was an A- student, he was going to be an A student. And when they didn't like him as an A student, he was going to make himself an A+ student. So he always just kept working on being better despite all that negative treatment. And, something that's been going on in our business is, like, it would be very easy to play the victim card here. And we'll get into that here in a second. But I think the most important thing here is that as patriots, what we do with this mentality is, like, we can go one of 2 ways. Like, especially with what's happening in the country right now, we can play the victim card. We can be like, oh, it's so unfair, the economy's terrible, our leaders don't listen to us, and just bitch and moan and complain and wallow in our misery. Or we can take ownership of the situation and become better. And I think that's what this whole conversation is going to focus on, because to the point of our business, I might as well just go there. We sell products that, according to tech firms, are suspect in the sense that, like, we're firearms adjacent for some of our products. Other products are political in nature because they're prepping products, and so they don't like that because typically right wingers are the people who are buying survival gear. And then some of our other products are weapons, like by design. We, like the Pain Safari website, painsafari.com. We sell non-lethal self-defense weapons, so stun guns inside of flashlights and discreet knives and all that kind of stuff. And they have a big problem with that, and we get penalized for it. And on top of that, we have made internal decisions to be a company that stands for Christian values. That's why you hear us talk about it. And we believe that commerce, or at least our business and the money that we generate, can be used to help fight the evil that we see in the world.
Build the kingdom.
Yeah. And we're constantly up against, like, a wall. Like, penalized is one thing. We just see that, like, well, for instance, inside of our category, which is sports and outdoors for Facebook and Instagram advertising, the average cost for a click. So, just to get somebody to click your ad, it's around 55 to 80 cents. 80 cents on the high side for the industry average. We just came out of a season, like when the giveaway was running, where we were paying upwards of $2.20-something cents, $2.30. So almost 3 times the industry average. And everything that we were doing was legal, was compliant, was exactly what they told us to do. Like, this particular company is like, hey, you have to say this, you can't say this. And it didn't matter. And, I've woken up so many days where I'm just like, it feels like Groundhog Day. Like, how is it this way again? How is it that we're always in this rhythm where it's just like us fighting an insurmountable enemy, if you will? Like, it's just always feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill. And sometimes it's easy to feel like this is unfair. I feel like a victim. But that's not going to do anything. And so listening to Suresh,
because the story that's easy to fall into is that there's nothing I can do here. Mm-hmm. Like, I have no ability. Like, I have no power. Like, this is the man's keeping me down. Like, that's the mentality that's easy to slip into.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do this in anywhere. And I think part of the problem that we have inside of this country right now is almost everybody, maybe not everybody, but like a lot of people are playing the victim card. This is why identity politics is such a big thing. They're like, look at me, I'm a victim. You need to do special things for me. And we have a $1 trillion apparatus in the government doing that exact thing. It's why you see freaking Bud Light hiring Dylan Mulvaney, and why you have Target putting all this gay shit everywhere. I don't apologize for saying that. That's exactly what it is. And it just is like, it's this cascading thing where people are victims. And now, unfortunately, we've created a culture where it's not only okay to be a victim, it's celebrated to be a victim. And that leads to
they're encouraging it. They're reinforcing it, saying like, oh yeah, you're right. You are a victim.
Yeah.
Like we gotta have, a day for you, and point out all of these ways that you are being persecuted.
Right. I mean, I bounce a lot of things off of you when we talk about this kind of stuff. Like, when you hear me saying these things, and like, obviously you can hear it in my voice where I'm like, man, it's getting to be hard. I feel like I'm grinding, all that stuff. Like, what's your response? Like, what do you want to say to me in the moment where like it may sound like I'm being a little bitch and playing the victim?
Well, I mean, typically my response to you is that, not to steal from Jocko, but it's like, good. Like there's no good and bad, right? When it comes to this stuff, there's just like the data, there's the information that enables you to make decisions that are what enable you to get to where you're trying to go. So it's like, we want to build a company that we are, able to get good products into as many people's hands as we can. And, there are obstacles that we face. So it's like, the sooner we know about them, the sooner we can start figuring out how to work around them. So it's like, I'd rather find out about things like that now. So I think my response to you typically is like, cool, man. Now we know more. Like, we know more. Does it suck? Sure. But like, the better we get at being stoic about it and just navigating it the same way you climb a cliff or walk down a path. It's like you're going somewhere and stuff gets in the way, and you gotta figure out how to circumnavigate it.
Yeah. I don't deny that sometimes I probably come off like a little whiny kid, and part of that, like, just
we're all like different, right? Like we all have different responses to stuff like this. We're all in our own place, like in each of our journeys. And like, I'm definitely a big subscriber of stuff happens for you, not to you. And like, you're a passionate guy. Like, you are passionate. Like,
well, it's not a problem,
and so,
but it helps with my responses. It's like, oh, no wonder he's like that. He's an angry elf.
Yeah, no, it's like, cause like when you have that reaction, I'm like, well, Adam's passionate. Like and you're the person that is tasked with that specifically. So you carry that weight and burden slightly differently. So I have the two thoughts I have. One is like kind of what I already said. And then the second one is like, when I know it's happening, like I am already starting to think about like, okay, the number one thing that someone needs in this situation is they need to have something they can take action on. Cause there's one of the dangerous things is like, if you either don't have someone that can't help you see that, or like, it's just very challenging to see what the actions can be, that makes it very difficult to not go into like that victim's mindset. So that's the secondary thing, is like, I'm immediately trying to figure out like, hey, here are the things that I see that I think we can start working. Here's how we can work the problem. So like, those are the two things I typically try and do. Is one, I try and redirect, and I try to acknowledge like, yeah, man, like if I'm sitting in your seat and I'm close enough to where like, it's, it frustrates me too. I'm not as directly carrying that though in the same way. So it's like, all right, let me redirect. Let me acknowledge, like, yeah, this is real. This is frustrating. What you're feeling right now is real. And here are some of the things that I think we can do. And then I try and shift us to that conversation of like, all right, cool. We know it sucks. Like, if you need to go outside and like smash something, or you need to go work a punching bag, like go do it. And then like, let's put that behind us, and like, let's just take action. Let's figure out here, like the 3 things we know we can do in the immediate. And then that'll probably open up more doors. Yeah.
I'm glad that you said that for everybody else's benefit. I've seen that when you're talking to me. And I with this, I'm being honest, not only to you, but to the people listening. Like, there are times where I feel like this, where I feel like it'd be so easy to just give in to being like, into the narrative of like, man, this is so unfair. And then I realized that doesn't accomplish anything. Just to whine about it, not to take ownership over the situation, not to look at it as an opportunity, is ultimately like, doing a disservice to the challenges and the suffering that God puts in our paths, and realizing that those are opportunities for self-improvement, as well as for improvement for other reasons, right? Like, it's not just for us, like, especially with the company, we've dedicated ourselves to saying, hey, we want to be better so that we can make better products, so that we can better equip people. Like, we have this whole why behind it. And I realized, like, if all of a sudden I give into being a victim and I play this card, then none of the things that I actually want to accomplish are going to happen. And on top of that, like, these unfair things have done a lot for my faith. They've done a lot for my personal relationships. They've done a lot for me in so many other ways. And ultimately, like, one of the decisions, like, the Jocko response is good. Now you know that you need to get better at this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, if it wasn't the case that we were being hit in the face with a 2x4 every single, like, honestly, it feels like every couple days something like this is happening, then we'd be mediocre. And, you know, there's plenty of mediocre companies out there. Like X-Holster.
Yeah.
You guys, if you see me in a video from Dinosaur Eyes or from X-Holster or from any of these others, and then you see a bunch of other crappy holsters, that's not me. They're stealing from us. Our lawyers have already spoken to them. So I know that X-Holster's probably not listening to this, but I hope they are. I hope the AI picks this up and sends it to their inbox and lets them know we're hunting for them.
There you go.
See,
yeah, that's a
predator.
No, taking action, man. Yeah. Taking action, not sitting on the hands. Yeah. You know, it's like I mean, think about, like, you know, a team that's building, like, and you know, not to use, like, overly, well, I'm okay with using masculine metaphors. But let's, you know, it's like a team building a dragster. Like, you know, you got this big event coming up, like, and you have been boosting the engine. You know, you've been doing things to increase the performance of the engine. Like, you know, you're going to want to know about weaknesses in the engine before you actually show up on race day. So it's like, you're going to get out on the track. You're going to run it. You're going to want to be prepared as a driver. You're going to want to make sure the machine's prepared. And I would rather find out about weaknesses or vulnerabilities, like in how things have been built, like, when I have time to repair it and fix it.
Right. Like,
when I have time to, like, actually make more adjustments. And so whether we're building a business or I'm talking about growing my, you know, my family's ability to be resilient, like, I'm constantly trying to figure out how to increase the, you know, the resilience of my kids. Cause I feel like, you know, things are so easy these days. Like, you have to be very intentional about introducing that stuff, cause then they get out in the real world, and the real world doesn't operate, you know, in the bubble. It's physics. It's the way, it's just the way it is. Like, things are the way they are in the world. The world does not care about your feelings. It does not care about, what you do or what you don't do. It's like, you either perform or you don't. You either get run over, you know, or you move at the pace of the machine. And, you know, so anyway, I would rather discover those things. So that's just something that's taken time for me. Like, I've journaled a lot over the years, and, like, I actually spend time reevaluating what happened on the day previous or the week prior, and the things that are negative, like, I will actually spend time writing and thinking about, like, why it's actually positive. Like, this is a good thing. And then over time, my brain has just started to see those things as, like, okay, cool, that's an opportunity.
Right.
You know, and I think I've also been fortunate in the years where, like, the businesses I've been involved in were very, very high stakes, like, launch intensive, where, like, when we would release a product, there was a whole lot of energy and organization and precision that involved, like, you know, promotional partners and, you know, a lot of money being spent to be ready for this thing. It's like, so everything had to be super dialed, and something always broke. It didn't matter, like, how much intention or checklists or preparation we had, something always broke. And so I just learned to be more resilient in those situations where it's like, this is just what happens. And, like, we're built to figure this out. So you do as much as you can to be prepared. So that way, when the predictable does actually, in fact, happen, like, you've got all the other stuff figured out and sorted, and, you know, you have the ability to be resilient and a little more agile and take a step back and we go, okay, all right, we can solve this problem. Let's just get the right people on it.
Yeah. And I think that's where, so the resilience is actually, like, the payout. Right. I think that a lot of times when like in the instance of our business, I'm thinking, man, if things would just work right, then we would make more money and then I'd be happier. Like, I'm not going to lie and say that I don't think that at times, but the resilience from the suffering is what is really the payout, because like then you can withstand other storms in your life. And so, James talks about this. It's James 2. It says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." It says nothing about attaining wealth, status, success, power. Literally, like, steadfastness produces a full effect, which is perfect and lacking in nothing. Now, of course, like, this is like, it says the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, which is reinforcing the faith, which is the faith in Christ, that he is enough. But I think that, like, this is where this whole victim thing, or what's happened over the past 16 months, is like really shaped my faith in a way that wouldn't have happened without this. Like,
no, you're definitely a different man than when I first met you. Like, you've grown a lot.
Yeah, and geez, I mean, we still had problems then. Not as many.
Yeah.
I loved bringing Nate on, and I was like, hey, man, like, it's just going to be smooth sailing. We've got, like, wide open seas here, blue sky, baby. We're going to be killing it. And then it was, like, literally, by the way, how big do you like your speed bumps? Because they're going to be huge. So you're in a...
It's like, I got lots of suspension. Yeah. I got to know the suspension works. So let's expect them at certain points.
Yeah, but
that's awesome.
Where I was going with that, other than for one, like, I know
with James.
Yeah,
Steadfastness.
If things work out inside of the company, it's not because that I did anything special. I believe it's just because, like, steadfastness is having its full effect, that we may be perfect, complete, and lacking in nothing. Like, just the benefit of having a successful company is that we achieve the why that we've developed for ourselves, for the people that we work with, and for the customers. And more importantly than that, like, I get to see something demonstrated in my life, which is God's faithfulness to me, just somebody who's committed their life to him. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, not that I've ever doubted, but I'm like, you do care. Like, look how much you care. Like, you brought me through this the whole way. And so, like, to the Jocko thing, good. Now we get to lean on God even harder. That's something that was kind of going through my mind. Like, Karl Marx says that religion is the opiate of the masses, and a lot of people have said, like, it's a crutch. Religion is a crutch, and I've come to realize over the decades that, like, religion is more than that, and especially, like, my faith with Christ. It's like, no, religion is the skeleton that holds me up. Like, I wouldn't even be anywhere without this faith.
I think it depends on where you're coming from on that, right? Because I think religion can be used to manipulate and control people as well. So it's like, I think it's one of those things where it's like, again, it's like, who's operating it?
Yeah, I think when you're just talking about an ambiguous term, religion, like when I'm actually talking about a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that's separate from religion.
Right.
At least, like, the way that, I mean, technically you could define it either way. Like, religion, I think the Greek of that means to tie yourself to something as an anchor. That's where the word religion comes from. So, I mean, that's why, it's an opiate. Because, like, hey, if you give people this false hope and then, like, this distorted religion, they're going to be fine. You can do anything you want to them. I mean, that's why Karl Marx was saying that. He's like, religion's great because, like, you can just subject them to all kinds of terrors and horrors, and they're just going to go with it. But at the same time, like, how good is that? Like, especially when the religion that you believe is true. I mean, awesome. You have that firm anchor in the storm.
Yeah. No, I would definitely say, like, over the last, like, 18 plus years of being an entrepreneur and starting companies, and just in general, just I've typically have charged life pretty hard. And again, I think that's part of that ADHD kind of, I like things moving fast. It's just the way I was wired. Like, I've created a lot of situations where if I had not had my faith to stand on, like, I don't know if I would be sitting here right now, because, I go back to, gosh, I was probably 32 and, made some decisions that, cost me the amount of money that, like, especially when your identity is completely wrapped up in how much money you make and, the way you're perceived, amongst your peers and in the marketplace. Like, if I hadn't had that to fall back on, I don't know if I would have been able to put myself back together. And I didn't put myself back together. That was, God put me back together, being able to know that Jesus died on the cross of my sins. Like, that's what enabled me to rebuild. Also on the kind of like on that victim, kind of shift it more on the family side. I think it's now more than ever too, like there's so many things happening in the world that it's putting so much stress on the family. We've got, a lot of people are feeling inflation now. A lot of people are feeling the stress of carrying the burden of being the, whether it's the breadwinner or it's a dual income household, like people are carrying that weight. There's a lot more pressure on that front. There's a lot more attack on the Christian values. Like if you're a Christian believer, like that's never been under more attack than it's ever been.
The history of the United States.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Like in our history, like in my lifetime, and I would say the lifetime of my, grandparents and great grandparents. But, so there's all these things that are happening right now. Decisions that are being made, by the government that, like, if you're watching things closely enough, I mean, you can very easily be like, everything's falling apart. Like the sky's falling. Like I have no control over any of this. And that's not true. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, like, yes, you don't have control over what people are doing, up at the Capitol, like the decisions that are being made there, but you do in fact have control of your situation. Like, you can make changes. You do have the ability to make different decisions. Like, I think a lot of people, when you get behind the power curve of like life, it's easy to, it's predictable. Like it's hard not to go into that victim's mentality. Like, I was talking to somebody recently, like they were blaming everybody except for taking ownership themselves. They were blaming their parents for like how like they wanted to be an entrepreneur when they were young, when they wanted to come out of school and they ended up taking this other traditional route, and now their life sucks and they hate it. And like, this other thing happened like with their kids, and like this is making their life challenging, and this thing's happening, and it's like all these things, and it's like, dude, like, man, I was like, man, like you're blaming everybody. Like you're pointing the finger at everybody, the world around you, like politicians, like, your parents, like, like even your kid, not even though it wasn't directly said that way. It's kind of like what was being said. Like, I have no control of the situation. This has just happened to me. And now my life is really, really challenging. It's like, I mean, it's, I think it's just, it's hard for someone to not end up in that place. Like if they just continue to get, raked over the coals.
And that's like, so everybody wants Donald Trump to win right now well, I mean, probably everybody. Let's just be honest. There's like a few handful of people who probably don't want that because they think that he's going to be the one that's going to save things. And I'm not saying he's a bad candidate. I'm not saying he's a good candidate. What I'm saying is that what has happened over the past 50 years is people have acquiesced to giving politicians more and more power, more and more control. And so when things are going wrong inside of the country, or when things aren't going the way that they want them, they're blaming the politicians, in part because what they did is they ceded control to politicians, and they like allowed themselves to become quote unquote victims. Like if we wanted that power back, we could take it. Really. I mean, that's exactly how this country came into existence. We had brave men and women. It's
supposed to be built that way.
Right, and that's the point of a constitutional republic, is that you can take it back. And so if we're complaining about it, one, we're doing the wrong thing. Like, we're actually, again, saying we're victims. You can't – there's nothing wrong with calling it out. Like, hey, this is evil. What you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is hurting the average American family. What you're doing is destroying the basic values and freedoms that we've come to hold dear here. Like, you can expose it. You can call it out. But then if you're just like, this isn't fair, we need a white knight in shining armor to come in and fix it. That's the issue that is like continuing that victim mentality.
History has proven that power corrupts.
And absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, it's been proven time and time again over the course of history. I mean, that's one of the things that, growing up, like we were taught that like our system the system is supposed to have checks and balances. So if something gets too far out, away from the core of how we're supposed to operate, it's supposed to be able to be brought back. And that's to your point. Like the people are supposed to be able to have the power to vote in, those who will, provide the corrective measure when it's needed to keep us on that path. And that's what I think for now, like, and I don't know if I don't think we were planning to go down this direction, but like, that's when I look at like the most current situation. It's like, what scares me is it's like I get people not liking Trump. Like I do actually get it. Like, and if I could choose a candidate, like, I don't think I would, I know I wouldn't choose Trump. Like there's lots of other people that I would choose. But what's scary is that the system is supposed to be built to be incorruptible. And so if we're willing to allow a system to be corrupted in order to prevent somebody that we just really don't like from being in the position that they are potentially going to be voted into, it's like, it blows me away that people can't look past that and go, this could be really problematic later.
Well, and like, that's how victims act too.
Right.
Like they're willing to be corrupted. They're willing to do evil things to get their way. Right. Like not all victims are like that. Some victims do the opposite. They just curl up into a ball and die. They wither away and they don't become anything. And others are just like, fine, if you're going to screw me, I'm going to screw you. And neither response is the correct response.
Right.
Yeah, it's
no.
The correct response is to rise above and to use the circumstance or the event that has taken place to act as a learning lesson, and then to use it as a touchstone to come back to and be like, okay, I am now a better person because of this. Like I didn't let it shape me for evil. Like it says again in the Bible, like what the enemy intended for evil, God intended for good. So like that's where these good things can happen. Like, I'm seeing what's happened with Trump, and let's just say that, I mean, I'm looking at it. For one, I had to look at this. Like, the whole thing is that he paid Stormy Daniels money, and that's the problem. Hush money's not illegal. Bill Clinton paid Paula Jones to keep her mouth shut. So that's something. And then they were saying that he wrote it off as a legal expense. Well, like the definition, like I know that they go into it, like it wasn't illegal to do that. So when you see these 34 felony convictions against him, you're like, that's unfair. That's why everybody's so mad, because they feel like they're a victim and President Trump's a victim. What I think is interesting, though, in Trump's response is that he's actually not playing the victim card. I mean, sure, he's saying it's a kangaroo court, which is not untrue. He's saying that it's never been done before, which is not untrue. Like, he's saying, hey, they're trying to do this because, like, they hate what you stand for, and I'm, like, the liaison between the people and between the power system, which is not untrue. So I think it's interesting how what he has done is actually not, I mean, to an extent, he's kind of invoked that victim mentality. Like, he's allowing it to, like, feed his campaign and everything like that, because he is saying it's unfair, but he's also using it, like, as a catalyst to move the ball forward. So, like, same thing with us. Like, when I see something bad happen, I'm like, this is bad. Like, with Facebook or with Google, I'm like, this is bad. It's not fair. Like, I'm just, like, looking at it for what it is, and I'm like, okay, but there are ways to fix this. So, like, we can acknowledge it, and then we can use it as a launch pad into something better, because, like if we can just expose, like, what has happened and why it's happened, then, like, we can just bypass it.
Well, and if we can thrive in a category that, like, is as challenging as it is, when we spin up a brand in a category that they don't have a problem with, like, we're going to be so dialed, like we'll be able to outmaneuver our competitors. So again, it's like iron on iron. It's
that steadfastness.
It's sharpening us.
Yeah,
it's sharpening us. They're making us better.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's, like, the best part of, like, recognizing the inconsistencies inside of life, right? Like, it's always an opportunity to become better. And, of course, like, if you want to dial it down to, like, why be better? Well, be better for yourself so that you can be better for other people. Like, I think that this is the way that I view Christianity, and, like, why God allows for challenges like this is, like, you get to learn a lesson here, and then you get to take it, and then you get to benefit other people with the lesson learned. And I believe if more people had that mentality, then the world would be a far better place, because it's just like, so many times, like people do the inverse, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking like the classic example of a person who grows up with no dad, like Suresh, for instance, who is in a system of impoverishment, single mom, right? They have a couple options here, and they're like, my life sucks. It's so bad. And they run to a gang. And then the gang corrupts them. And then all of a sudden, they're part of the problem that they attempted to escape from. Like, So if you instead you're like, I'm going to take this, I'm going to use this as a lesson, then you can actually benefit other people. Like Suresh is doing, a multimillionaire, running a company,
Yeah,
creating
he's
products. Creating
he's a
products
beast.
for cops.
He's a beast. Like, you're not going to beat that guy.
Right.
Not going to beat him.
No.
Not going to beat him. Like, I'm glad we're not directly competing with Suresh. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Yeah, man. And dude, we're just not wired as people to coast. Like, there's a reason why, like, we have a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. There's a reason why, like, muscle.
Hold on. Can you explain that for people who don't know the difference?
Yeah. So, sympathetic, your sympathetic nervous system is essentially what exists as fight or flight. So when something happens that's threatening your safety, that's what kicks in. Your sympathetic nervous system is what, like, tells you and gives you additional resources to boogie on out of whatever that situation is, whether it's running up a tree or it's leaving a room or it's getting out of a toxic relationship, whatever it is. Like, that's your sympathetic nervous system. Now the counterbalance to that is your parasympathetic. So when your body recovers from that and you go into more of the peaceful state and you're more relaxed and your resources are more available to really be fully present to everything around you and not just the tree that you need to climb, that's your parasympathetic. So,
okay.
Yeah. So with that, we're, and again, go back, when does muscle grow? Muscle grows when it tears.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything about our physiology, like, is indicative of the fact that, like, we're meant to create things. We're meant to push. We're meant to grow. We're meant to struggle. Like, that's what life is. It literally is it's a struggle. Like, and the better you get at navigating that and managing it, like, the more successful person you're going to be. And I think that's why, it's not the only reason why, but one of the things that is contributing to what we're seeing right now with people, falling into these victim mentalities, or like they have no, like, we're also meant to have something that's a bigger purpose than ourselves too. So now we have people that are more comfortable than they have ever been. They have no challenges. Like, they're kind of like this rudderless ship that's kind of being pushed around wherever mainstream media and the culture pushes and wants to manipulate. And then that's how we end up with, people that are, their identity is, a video game, or it's, this, I mean, yeah, or, I mean, and this isn't to knock on, like, like Star Trekkers, but like Trekkies, like people, like the level of enthusiasm and passion that people get for, like, things like that, or Star Wars, or, like, we got people running around as furries now. It's like, there's something that's missing, that, like, there's a calling that they haven't found yet, that, that's something that really actually benefits themselves, benefits society, like, connects at their core.
Are you thinking they're escaping into that? Like, I'm just curious if that's.
I wouldn't say. I mean, it could be escaping. It could be.
Like, when your whole life is wrapped up in that identity, not
right.
just like, oh, I enjoy Star Wars and maybe I'll go and do a thing.
Right, but there's like books out there that you can buy that give all sorts of additional backstory and history on characters and places and times in that Star Wars kind of, like, series, and it's like. And it's cool. I mean, it's cool that something grabs somebody to that degree. Like, there's part of it that's really cool. Like, all right, that really speaks to, you're into it. Like, that's awesome. Be into something. But I think it could, some people could be escaping. I mean, there's stuff I escape into. I mean, like, that for me, like, my escape was exercise. Like, that was how I escaped. Like, I was like, that was my escape 100%. Like, that was my drug, was training and working out and all of that. But I think there could be some level of escape, but I think it also is, we're meant to to be a part of something bigger than ourselves.
Hmm.
And I think so part of it's like trying to find that identity, like trying to find the thing that they belong to. So I think that plays a pretty strong role for that too. And then, and then they're,
Yeah, I just wanted to like introduce the idea that like with the DEI movement, diversity, or equity and inclusion, or equality and inclusion, like in identity politics, that's exactly what you see. But what happens, and people wonder like why we're so divided right now. It's because like more and more divisions are being created, like stratifications inside of society. Now it's like I'm a black trans this that or the other, and I'm a this that, I'm a pansexual this, or I'm a that, and it's like everything is categorized. And so most of that having come out of like a victim reaction, like I've been treated this way and so I'm going to go this way, and now I'm isolating myself. Like you even see it with the LGBTQIA plus groupings, where there's like factions inside of there that are warring against each other, right? And so I think the point that I was trying to make here is that like part of the reason that America is in such dire straits is because people have just retreated into these blocks, these identity politic blocks. I mean, it's alive and well in the conservative movement, as you know, like there are different forms of this in the conservative movement. I'm not pointing to that necessarily being a problem, but there's not a lot of unity around like a central truth any longer. Instead, it's just like, I'm a victim. Here I am. In this group.
Do you think that, or in your opinion, do you think that's why they're trying so hard to like prove to people? So for the longest time, it's like there's always people that were trying to prove that God doesn't exist. So you look at the two things that like the two of the core, the two of the things that were foundational to our country was one nation under God and this flag. This flag is what unites us. So like they've been attacking God for decades, centuries even. But here in the United States, it's been decades where it's been a constant like attack. And now it's attacking like the fabric of the country itself. So like God and country. Those were the two things that like you could walk into any sports stadium or church or like, public event. And as soon as that song's played, like we're all connected, like we're all here, like we all are standing up, like in honor of like what this represents. And so it's interesting how I feel like it's shifted to just, okay, so there's been this attack on God for many years. And now it's like the country's turned on itself, where now it's like we can't even unite under the flag anymore.
So what's your question there?
My question is like, in your opinion, is that part of like, so it's like, I don't think there's any question that God's been under attack. I guess my question is like, based on all of these different ways of identifying oneself, like people they're identifying as like whatever the thing is they're identifying now. And then of course there's still a lot of people that will say like, I'm an American. Like that's who I am, or it's part of who I am. Do you believe that like that's part of like what's happening right now? Is whether it's intentional or not almost doesn't matter to me. It's more of, is what's happening inside of our culture making it such that people are not like it's ripping apart that piece that unites us under the flag.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of.
I don't know if I'm making sense with that, but
yeah, it's why am I blanking on the educational movement that's attempting to make it so that James Lindsay talks about this a lot. It's I'm gonna have to mark this so that we can bring it in. It's CRO, or like, yeah, actually let's mark this.
Mark.
Can you mark it?
Yeah, mark
critical race theory. There it is. So critical race theory is that big one, right? So they're trying to teach critical race theory in schools all across the United States. And critical race theory is basically, white people are bad and black people have been victims the entire time that we've been in the United States. And so what critical race theory does is it undermines the substrate of America, like in the sense that like we were founded as a constitutional republic allowing for religious freedoms, the expression of religious freedoms as you see fit. and of course the rights to pursue life, liberty, and happiness as you see fit, so long as you're not impairing anybody else's ability to do so. So by creating more victims and more victim communities, that you're basically saying, hey, look at all these people who have been disenfranchised by the core of American institutions. And that allows for you to take America apart bit by bit. So I think that that's, and that's something that's been engineered for 50, 60 years right now. So if you can convince everybody that God is dead like Nietzsche did, I'm not everybody, but like if you can start to realize, like if you're in a postmodern world and it's like God doesn't matter anymore, like we're beings of logic and of intellect, and we don't need superstitions any longer for self-determination. Cool. Now you got that, and then you're like, oh, by the way, the country that you live in is absolutely terrible. So let's go ahead and take it apart. It's not that hard. I mean, that's why you see all these blueberries in a bowl of tomato soup across the United States. Like people have isolated themselves and retreated into echo chambers, or literally in this case municipalities, where everybody has groupthink, and then the rest of the country is just kind of normal. I mean, sure, they're divided in some sense, and like among those people inside of those large cities, like you have so many factions, but unfortunately more people live in those cities than the rest of the United States, and so they're the ones with the voting power. They can control the electoral votes mostly, and that's how they're able to, like, that's how this country is going to fall apart if it does. I mean, I believe we're at the end of an empire. I still have hope that there is a way to save it. You just look at history. The average age of an empire is like 250, 300 years, something like that. And we're almost at 250 years. So I think these were the instruments for causing the United States to end up in this position. I'm just hopeful that like more people can galvanize around central truths, which is, one, you're not a victim. You're in charge of your life. You're in charge of your responses to the situations that you find yourself in life. You can't control anything about your life, really, but you can control how you respond to things.
Yep. Yeah, 100% agree with that. It's not always pleasant, but it's true.
I think it's hardly ever pleasant.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately.
I do think you can reprogram your. I know you can reprogram your game where maybe it's not pleasant. You're like, oh yeah,
but you can endure.
It's another.
So yesterday, so what I've been doing for listeners is lately I've just been like, I sit in my office too much. So I've been getting on my treadmill. I have a curved treadmill. I throw on all of our calls. I can see people. They can see me. And then I've been throwing on a 30-pound weight vest. It's not easy, but I do it because I'm like, how do I make like the situations outside a little bit easier? Well, I'll go ahead and subject myself to, like, it's not torture, but like physical hardship.
Getting your body.
Right.
Just
Jumping in a cold plunge always sucks. Take a week off a cold plunge and then try and get in there for a minute, and it's so much harder than if you just go like a month solid and you go 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes every single time. And then like the 5 minutes is no more difficult than the first minute because you're just accustomed to it. You learn how to endure. It's still not pleasant though. I think that's probably the thing is you're like, you can acknowledge that it's still not pleasant, but you're like, I can endure this.
Well, you start to realize like the cost benefit.
Yeah. No,
I know when I was doing cold plunge a lot, and I still need to finish building mine to be able to do it every day. But when I was doing it a lot, like I knew that I was getting benefit from it. So it's like, it's like, oh, it's like one of those things where it's like, it hurts, but you know that with that hurt comes something that's actually, you end up being better afterwards.
Yeah. You know what though? I'm an extreme wuss when it comes to the cold plunge, and that I cannot put my hands in. Like longer than 15 seconds, I can't do it.
It took me a while to be able to put the hands in. I'm not gonna lie. I was the same way for a long time. Like the one that even took me longer was like actually putting my head under, where I was just like,
I can do that. For
the hands is unique though.
Yeah, well most of your cold and heat receptors are on your hands.
Yeah.
Like you've got tons of capillaries there that supports all of your nerve endings, and so
it enhances the experience for sure.
Oh my gosh, like yeah. So I guess I have to not be a victim and just get in there all the way.
You're victimizing yourself by not putting your hands in.
I'm victimizing myself by putting my whole body in there in the first place.
For real.
But yeah, we don't need to be the cold plunge guys. The whole point is like I think that you can accept the fact that situations, whether temporary or chronic, can suck. and you can admit that they suck. But then again, like, let suffering have its full effect. That you end up creating, like, steadfastness leaves you perfectly complete, lacking in nothing. So that's why it's okay to admit that something is not fun and to continue on through it without having to verbalize it every second of the way.
Yeah. 100%, man.
So cool.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say for our listeners, if you want to listen to Suresh's story, it's on episode 28. This should be episode 29, I think, so just the one right before this. And, yeah, I know you've got to go to a fun weekend with your family, so.
Yes, sir. Possum Kingdom, here we come.
Possum Kingdom?
Yeah, that's where it is. There's a lake west of Dallas. It's called Possum Kingdom. It's basically the equivalent of like what Lake Travis was like back in like I'd say the 80s, 90s. So it's like, but a lot of people in Dallas know about it. So there's a lot of houses built, immediately around the lake, but the area is not super developed. So it's not overcrowded. I mean, holidays, the lake can get pretty raucous out there, but it's an awesome lake. It's like limestone bottom, if I remember right. So the water's clear. It's good temperature. It's deep. Yes. So looking forward to that. They're already out there. I'm trailing. I'm bringing up the rear in the truck with the rest of the supplies.
Well, let's get you out of here. First off, thanks everybody for listening. Please don't forget to follow us on whatever podcast app you're listening to. Please leave a review. It helps us, helps the algorithm, and if you believe that what we're talking about is worth sharing, it's certainly going to get it in front of more people. If you want to follow us, you can go to patriotonpurpose.com, where our Instagram is, our YouTube is, all of that good stuff, as well as our newsletter list, where you can be entered into win giveaways that we have going on, see some of our products, and all of that good stuff. And, of course, we just want to thank you for listening. It means the world to us that you're doing that.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.